to Books with Brandywine. A couple of days ago, the Bookish Islander posted a video that was the try a chapter tag. And he said that this is like an old tag. I'm kind of new to BookTube. I've only been here for 6 months, so I haven't heard of it before. But I really liked the concept, and he invited everyone who hadn't done it to do it. So I'm doing it because it's awesome. So the rules for this book tag are really simple. You choose 5 or more books that you have been meaning to get to or meaning to read. And then you read only the first chapter. And then from just that first chapter, you decide if you're going to continue reading it or if you're going to put it aside. So I did not notice the meaning to read part. So I just chose 5 random books. And the reason I chose like 5 random books was because if I own the book or if I've been like interested in it and it's ended up on my TBR, I am going to read it. I'm like really bad about DNFing books. Like even if I do DNF a book, I do go back someday and read it. Like I have a hard time not finishing a book. And I know not everybody's like that, and like a lot of people, if they don't like the book, they don't force themselves to finish it. But it bugs me if I don't finish it, because I'm like, I want to know how it ended. There was only one book where I did DNF, and I like didn't even bother me, and that was Sense and Sensibility, I think. I know it was one of her books, and I went and found like the synopsis of it on Wikipedia so I could find out what happened, because I was just like, I can't do this. I was like, this book is just boring me. And I had just read Jane Eyre like just before it. So to go from Jane Eyre to Sense and Sensibility, I know a lot of people love her books and I still want to read Pride and Prejudice, but I just could not do Sense and Sensibility. I just could not. The 5 books I chose, I went to the library and I like found just 3 random books that looked interesting. And then I ran out of time, so I went home and I chose one of my husband's books. And then I also chose a book that I am planning on reading, but I'll explain that one when I get to it. So for the first book that I chose, it was called The Queen's Poisoner. And when I first read the title, I thought it said The Queen's Prisoner. And it wasn't until after I read the first chapter and looked back at the cover that I realized it said Poisoner. So I don't actually know what the synopsis of the book is because I didn't read the back of it, but it's a fantasy novel, and basically the whole first chapter is this mom and her son, who is one of her surviving children. She's had 9 kids and only 5 have survived to adulthood, and this is her youngest, and he's like, I think they said like 7 or 9 years old or something, and she's just petting his head while he's comforting her because she's freaking out because her husband hasn't come home from the latest battle yet. And then he comes home, and she finds out that her oldest son is now dead because he refused to back up the king, and the king is vicious and ordered their son to be executed, and now they are demanding her pick another son to send to be a ward at the castle to ensure the loyalty of this lord. And that's the whole first chapter. I don't think I'm going to be finishing this book. It was okay, but it didn't, grab my attention, and since it wasn't a book that I was already emotionally invested in, it's easy for me to not finish the book. That's the weird thing about doing this challenge for me, is, just reading one chapter and then making a decision on that. So I had to tell myself, I was like, look, you've already told yourself you're going to make the decision after this one book, so I'm not going to feel guilty about not finishing that book, because I wasn't emotionally invested in it. The second book that I chose, I'm blanking on the title, but you will see it next to me. And it was actually a book that I was kind of interested in. I'd heard about this series before, and so I was already kind of interested in it. I read the first chapter. It's not a masterpiece by any means, but it is kind of entertaining, and I could see myself actually finishing that book, if not the whole series, just because it's fun and it's I say light. But the premise of the book is that, from what I gathered from just the first chapter, and I don't remember the synopsis of the series that I've read before, but basically the plague happened so many times in the world that people with royal blood, their bodies started mutating from exposure to the plague, and instead of dying, they became vampires or lycans. So like in England, the royal family became vampires. In Scotland, the royal family became lycanthropes. Mostly in cold areas. So like Russia, they became lycanthropes, but like Spain and France, they became vampires. So just like royal families, different places, started, like showing up. And Queen Victoria was the first, I think they said it was Queen Victoria. I know she's for sure the queen that was ruling at the time, and she'd been ruling for 150-ish years. But I can't remember if she was the first vampire to like admit that they had this mutation, or if it was a different king. They mentioned the king that like started to show symptoms of it, but they weren't like full blood. But I don't remember the names. And I only read it once and it's at the library, so I don't have it in front of me. But the main character is a Haffy, I think is what they called them. So her dad is an aristocrat and a vampire, and he went through like a mid-eternity crisis, I think is what she called it. And he just impregnated as many courtesans as he could, and 5 of them, actually, I think 5 of them, they said, actually ended up giving birth out of 9. And she was like the kind of a middle child. No, she was the second oldest child, I think. And so if you're not like a vampire or a werewolf, then there's halvesies, which are like half human, half vampire. And then there's humans, which don't like any of them. And then there's these things, what do they call them? Something Betties, Beauty Betties or something. And they'll like take the plague, or they'll take the gene. I forget what they called it too. It was like the gene had a name, but they'll like take it so they'll get super strong and super fast, but they're still not as fast as even the halvesies, who are still not as fast as the full vampires. And they like attack halvesies and stuff because they don't like them, but they're taking the plague to be like them, but they don't like them. And then there's goblins, which it sounded like was what happens when vampire blood and werewolf blood mix, I think, is what she was saying. And sometimes it'll happen from like people that don't know that they have recessed genes, because apparently the royals got around a lot, so even like the peasants kind of have the gene. And the goblins look like werewolves but smaller, and they're really, really brutal, and they're really proud of their mutation, and so you don't mess with them. And so the main girl is a Havesi, and she's like really tough, and she's like a trained fighter, and she's searching for her sister, her little sister who's gone missing. And it's not a masterpiece of writing by any means, but I was enjoying it. I could totally see, like, it's interesting to be in this other world. And then, like, the cell phones are called warderies, and so, like, I thought that was cool, but I was like, it's totally a cell phone that she was describing. I'm pretty sure. I don't think she was describing a landline. But yeah, so I could see myself finishing that one. The third book that I picked up, I'm blanking on the title again. I think it was called, like, When the Emperor Was Among Us or something. But I will have the picture next to me so you can see. And I will link all of these books down in my description, because they're library books. A lot of, like, the authors are covered. So I will definitely try to link all of these to the Goodreads so that you can find the books if you go looking for them. So the third book that I picked up, it was really, really thin. And it takes place during World War II. And it's describing the Japanese internment camps. And so the whole first chapter is this mom who sees these signs all around Berkeley. And I'm guessing these signs were saying that they were going to be interned, but I don't know because they never actually said what the signs say. But she sees the sign and she starts packing. And she packs like everything away into this room and locks the room. And she doesn't know who's going to be in the house while she's gone, but she just knows they're not going to be there. And then her and her 2 kids pack their suitcases. And then they go and they report to... I forget what they said the center was called, but they go and they report to be taken to these internment camps. And so the whole first chapter is her just mentally preparing and packing everything up, and her kids coming home from school, and the interactions with the 2 kids who are, I think they said like 7 and 10, and the dad isn't there because the dad's already been arrested and put in an internment camp. And so that one, like, I could actually see myself finishing. I thought it was, like, the writing was interesting to see it, like, everything from the mom's point of view, and the things that the mom did to prepare, and that people that she knew, like, she talks to this one shopkeeper, and it's like, he knows, and she knows, but they don't straight out say that she's going to this internment camp, and, like, her daughter's wondering why people are staring at her, but they're staring at her because she's Japanese, and Pearl Harbor just happened, I think, like, a couple months before, and, people didn't trust Japanese at the time, even though, like, Japanese Americans were serving for the Americans in the war, but just all the prejudice and the hate that was at that time. And so, I think, like, it would be interesting to read it. I don't know very much about what happened at that time period. I've only visited the Holocaust, I think it's the Holocaust Museum, or the Japanese internment camp museum in LA only once. So, and we didn't really study it very much in school, so I don't really know. Sorry, my voice sounds strained. I have a cough, which will be being edited out as much as I can, but my voice sounds weird because of that cough. But, like, I really want to finish the book because I want to know more about what they were going through. I think it's a very important part of our history, a very sad part of our history, but very important, and I want to learn more about it. And then the fourth book that I chose, so the fourth book is The Rise of the Horde by Christie Golden, and this is one of my husband's books, and I picked it up because all of my books that I already own, like, if I own it, I'm going to read it. Like, I spent money on it, I'm going to read it. But my husband's books don't really fall in that category in my mind. Like, he wants me to read his books, but it's not the highest thing on my priority. So I picked one of his books. I have read another book by this author. I actually mentioned it, I think, in my very first video. She wrote Arthas, which is about the Lich King that my son is named after. And so I read that book because I wanted to know more about this man that my son is named after. And so this book is another book written by her. It's in the World of Warcraft universe, which I know very little about. So even just reading the first chapter, I was asking my husband a ton of questions, but he bared with, and he was telling me all the lore. And this book is good. Like, she's such a good author. And so I'm thinking, like, I kind of want to finish the rest of the World of Warcraft books, so I know more about the world. Unfortunately, Activision is going through some problems right now, so I don't know how long World of Warcraft will be around, but my husband has a Horde tattoo, my son is named after one of the characters, so even if World of Warcraft does end up ending, I still want to know more about the lore. And then the next book was Maya Angelou's Gathered Together in My Name, and this was the book that I was saying that I was already planning on reading. I just finished reading I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and I could not get enough. Like, I want more Maya Angelou. And so I went to the store, and they only had like 3 other of her books, and I was trying to figure out which one to read next, but this one, so I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings ends when she's 16, and this one picks up immediately from there and goes for the next 2 or 3 years. So this is the one that I chose to read next, but I wanted to read the first chapter as part of the challenge and see, like, do I really want to read another one of her books, because they are, like, heavy and emotional for me, and, like, take a lot, like, I feel exhausted after reading them because it's so much of an emotional roller coaster. But I read the first chapter, and I love her writing, I love her style, I love how she talks, and this book seems to be right up that alley. The first chapter is just setting up, it's the prologue, and it's just setting up, like, what's going on. It's setting up San Francisco post-World War II. So it's, like, right after the wars ended, and, everything people are going through, and then it's specifically what her, experiences are. And then even if I did count, like, the first chapter is, or chapter 1 is 1 page. Yeah. It's, well, 1.5 pages is the first chapter. And I still love it. I still love, like, her way of talking. So I'm now halfway through this book. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be finishing this book. So overall, out of the 5 books that I read, one of them I'm not going to read because it just didn't interest me. One of them I could see me reading the whole series just because it was fun and lighthearted. Trying to remember the books again. The next one, I definitely want to read because it's a part of history that I want to learn. The 4th one is the World of Warcraft book, and I do plan on reading it eventually, though I probably won't be getting to it within the next 30 books or so. And the 5th book, I'm like totally finishing this book. I'm already halfway through it. I couldn't put it down. But, overall, I really liked this tag. I thought it was different. I thought it was going to be a challenge to try and read only one chapter, especially with the first one that I decided I'm not going to finish reading. I was like over it even before I got to the end of the chapter, but I was like, no, I'm going to make it to the end of the chapter. And now I need to find my library card so I can go back and get the other 2 books. I've been really bad and I don't even know where my library card is. I suspect where my library card might be, but I don't know for sure. And I don't remember my PIN number. And it's really sad because the library is like a block from my house. I am like so bad. But that is something I'm going to remedy. But anyway, so I definitely encourage all of you to do this book tag. I will be tagging specific people in the comments below, but I also tag anyone that hasn't done it yet or just wants to do it or wants to do it again to do this book tag because it's really easy and it's kind of different and I loved it. So I will see you guys in a few more days.